Welcome to Middle East Observer with me, Nicholas Richardson. On the 20th of March 2003, the United States and the United Kingdom invaded Iraq. After the overthrow of the dictator Saddam Hussein, coalition troops installed democracies in ancient Mesopotamia for 9 years. During this time, massive waves of violence and civil war and uprisings against Western forces swept across Iraq. After 20 years, we can see that democracy in Iraq is quite stable and is a beneficial solution for the country, where Sunni and Shia Arabs, as well as Christians and Kurds, and many other smaller ethnic and religious groups live. In this patchwork, each of these groups is represented. And despite constant crises, Iraq is bravely moving towards stability, which a regional reset of relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia might improve. One of the undoubted beneficiaries of the overthrow of Saddam Hussein is the Iraqi Kurds. The Iraqi dictator was responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of Kurds, including chemical attacks on Kurdish towns and villages. During the period of chaos after 2003, Iraqi Kurdistan was a prosperous and stable part of Iraq. Today we will look at this region and consider how it looks after 20 years, especially since two regional powers, Iran and Saudi Arabia, began cleaning up the Middle East from war and conflict, both countries having clashed in Iraq. And to discuss this in more detail, I'm delighted to be joined by my guest, Sardar Sattar, an analyst, journalist and a reporter on the Kurdish Chronicle. Sardar, thank you for joining us once more.
Thank you for having me, Nicholas.
Always a pleasure. I can't believe it's 6 months since we last had you on the programme. Time is really flying.
Exactly.
Well, anyway, in the Muslim world, we're about to prepare for the ceremony, the festival of Ramadan. But before that, of course, in Kurdish areas and indeed in Iran and Afghanistan, there's been the festival or the celebrations of Nowruz. How could you just explain it in your part of the world what these celebrations actually comprise?
Well, Nowruz is the beginning of, it starts with the beginning of spring, and it's celebrated by many nations throughout the Middle East, from Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan to Iran, and all the Kurdish communities in different parts of Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Iran. Specifically in the Iraqi Kurdistan, we usually celebrated right on the 21st of March, which also marks the beginning of spring. And the celebrations are colorful and beautiful all the time. Usually it starts with a huge festival that authorities and the government sponsors and brings all the people together in specific areas. In Kurdistan region of Iraq, there is one town called Acre, which is dubbed as the capital of Nowruz. There is a high mountain that this year 2,700 people carried torches of fire to the top of the mountain. Actually, it attracts so many international tourists every year. And also families celebrate the festival with food and dances and reunion of different members of the family. Also, the first 3 days of spring, usually people go to picnics outside the cities, and these festivals are huge in number and very complex in traditional rituals.
Excellent. Now, of course, the big news from the Middle East region has been the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And I was wondering how that is being seen in Iraq. I mean, what's your view of the effect this is likely to have?
Well, the deal caught so many, from east all the way to the west, caught so many people by surprise. But while some people are expecting it to have a huge impact on the proxy political tensions in the region, some others believe that it is too soon to jump into conclusion and make any assumptions. Of course, this deal is a breakthrough for signing it, but the implementations are going to face so many challenges because both Iran and Saudi Arabia have been in political tensions for so long. They have actually had severe diplomatic relations for 7 years. And they are engaged in proxy wars in Yemen, in Syria, in Lebanon, and especially in Iraq, which is what we are focused on here. Iraq itself has been desperate to have good relations with both Saudi Arabia and Iran. Iran has been always, since 2003, Iran has always been one of the main stakeholders in Iraq. It actually influences the policymakers in Baghdad very greatly. And Saudi Arabia is another neighbor that shares a very long border with Iraq. And Iraq cannot side with any of them if it wants any prosperity for its future. It has been desperate to maintain good relations with them, but it was caught always between the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And I believe that it's a point of relief for Iraq to have both its neighbors signing a deal that was brokered by China.
Yes, and you make a good point, the broker of the deal by China. I mean, how do you see the influence of China in this process, and indeed what it means for the future?
China just moved in the right time, I believe. It has claimed that it's following the policy of non-interference. That means that unlike the West, unlike the United States especially, it follows a route to expand and strengthen its economic ties and economic influence throughout the Middle East until it reached to North Africa. And unlike the United States, it avoids any lecturing of the nations on democracy or Western version of democracy or the internal affairs of these countries. What China is looking for is basically strengthening its influence throughout the Middle East.
Yes, have you experience of any particular Chinese influence within Iraq itself?
Well, China has been, for the past few years, China has been working on economical and infrastructural projects throughout Iraq. It was a year ago that China signed a huge deal with Iraq that was called 1,000 school project. That is, it funds building 1,000 schools all around Iraq. And that's not the only thing. It has been engaged in the oil sector of Iraq, especially in the oil-rich province of Basra in south of Iraq. And it has always been looking for economical influence. In the Kurdistan region, 2 years ago, it was announced that they are signing a deal with the Kurdistan regional government for an foreign investment project that costs about $5 billion. It is a gigantic touristic town that will be constructed outside capital Erbil. And it has been going on like this for years. It's not something new that China eyes Iraq or the Kurdistan region or any other nations in the Middle East. It has not been new, but the deal has just consolidated the Chinese influence and their will to improve and strengthen their engagement in the region.
Yes, now of course the normalization of relations between Saudi and Iran is one thing. We see that Saudi is also trying to bring Syria back within the Arab fold, and so we might say there's almost, probably slightly exaggerated, but a sort of an outbreak of peace in the Middle East. And I was wondering what these various initiatives would mean for the wider Kurdistan region.
The Kurdistan region is, of course, a non-state actor in the region, but it has been playing a great role, especially recently with respect to energy crisis in Europe, and it has been trying to fill some of the gaps. But the Kurdistan region, since it is a non-state actor in the region, it only benefits from the good relations between the main regional players. So I believe that the Kurdistan region welcomes any initiative that brings the nations throughout the Middle East, especially around Iraq and the Kurdistan region, it welcomes any initiatives of such, but I don't believe that there are any obstacles that any closeness between two rival forces or two rival states would harm Kurdistan or impact it in any ways.
Yes, now of course it's hard to believe, but it's 20 years since the Allied invasion, if invasion is the right word, of Iraq. And I was wondering, from your position, looking back, I mean, how would you assess those 20 years? And really, what has been the impact also specifically on Iraqi Kurdistan, or the Iraqi part of Kurdistan?
Well, Nicholas, you're right. It's really controversial and a hard word to use, whether we stick to the word invasion or freedom of Iraq. But anyway, many Iraqis still see it as invasion because the outcome, the past 20 years have been catastrophic for the Iraqi people. Right after 2003 and the toppling of Saddam Hussein, the Coalition Provisional Authority, or CPA, was established in Baghdad that made some, let's say again, catastrophic decisions. One of them was the Baathification, which itself was a great decision. But the way that it was implemented was catastrophic. Why? Because through the Baathification phase, the CPA dismissed hundreds of thousands of Iraqi government employees. Remember that during the Ba'ath regime, you had to be one of the members of the Ba'ath regime to be employed by the government. So literally, let's say they dismissed everyone from government, all the government employees. The second step was even greater catastrophic, was dismantling the Iraqi army. Bear in mind that when you dismantle the Iraqi army, you are just leaving hundreds of thousands of people with arms, frustrated and looking for revenge. And these all together led to a phase of instability and distrust between the communities in different parts of Iraq. We all remember that soon after the invasion of Iraq, or let's say liberation of Iraq in 2003, different terrorist groups, especially Al-Qaeda, got a huge impact on the security and safety of the Iraqis. And until today, some people believe that the policies of the United States has created an Iraq that is strong enough to function, but it is also weak enough to never walk away from the influence of Washington or the United States or the Western world. Also, U.S. removed the Iraqi army when people felt scared. We remember, I personally remember from personal experience that back in 2005, when I first came back to Kurdistan region of Iraq, I was always thinking that there were no police or army forces, but when people were living in a very unstable situation, they could only see convoys of U.S. forces, but with big signs on their cars that you have to stay away from the convoys or we are allowed to shoot you.
Sadar, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Alas, we've run out of time, as we always do. We're just when we're getting into really interesting conversation. I hope we see you again soon on the programme. Let's hope it's not 6 months away. But anyway, thank you very much, and I wish you well until we meet again.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure. Well, as usual, we've been defeated by the clock midway through a very interesting discussion. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Middle East Observer.